fun. Okay, thank you very much for coming along to tonight's official hustings for the ULU Sabbatical Trustee, Student Trustee and London Student Editor elections for 2012. The people that are going to be elected in the coming election will take office on the 1st of August 2012 and serve all the way through until the end of July 2013. The sabbatical positions of President and Vice President are also trustees of ULU. There is also a paid office position of London Student Editor as well, which edits the London Student newspaper, which is published by ULU, which is editorially independent of ULU. There are also 4 vacancies for student trustee position. The student trustees join the sabbatical trustees on the ULU trustee board, which acts as the governing body of ULU. There are 2 candidates for student trustee. One candidate has submitted a statement, one has requested to submit a statement, but one hasn't come through. I will make a decision later on tonight about whether we proceed with the actual hustings for that, and I'll update you. We're going to start with the husting for President for tonight, as there was last year. Each candidate will get 3 minutes to address you. During that time, I ask that you remain quiet, listen to the candidate. If you'd like to ask a question, do write it down on paper. Please do put the title of the post, President, in question. You can do that for any position at any time. Submit them to Hesham, who is on my right. Hesham is the current editor of London Student. He's not seeking re-election. He's here to assist. It's a kind of a tradition in ULU that any sabbatical not freestanding assists in the hustings event. After we've got the speech out of the way for all of the candidates for a position, there will be the opportunity to read some of the questions which are selected out. After each question has been asked, each candidate will get 1 minute to answer them. We will then proceed to a round of 3 supplementary questions, which can be just directly asked from the floor. Supplementary questions can be directed at any candidate. As an example, a candidate may say, I believe in 24-hour libraries. Someone may well say, I do not agree with what X has said, but what is your alternative? And all of the other candidates can effectively cause a debate. On those supplementary questions, you're going to get 1 minute. I'll keep an eye on the clock because we essentially need to go through this in a timely fashion, but obviously it's your opportunity as the voters and representatives of the voters to ask those questions and get the answers, hopefully, that you need. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the candidates for President to come forward.
Do we want to wait for Ian? He's 1 minute away. No.
I won't wait for Ian. Hustings technically started at 7 o'clock. Sean, please come to the front, stand to the right of Hesham. The candidate standing for President is Sean Ronchko, currently ULU Vice President, and the other candidate in this election is reopened nominations. After you've introduced yourself, Sean, you will then have 3 minutes, and I will give you 30 seconds on the table.
Hello, I'm Sean Ronchko. I'm current ULU Vice President, and I'm standing for President. I'm asking ULU students to elect me so we have a strong campaign in union, continuing the work we've done over the last few years. I come from Birkbeck College next door, which is a mature and part-time institution. I've come to education as an adult and I've really enjoyed being at somewhere like Birkbeck. Been chair of the student union there, where we face a lot of challenges and difficulties. We need to help our students a lot and fight for them even more because our students are working, our students are parents, our students are disabled and very diverse. So I've been an effective champion for them at every level of the college. I've fought for their rights and I've helped get the London Living Wage, for example, for everyone at Birkbeck, including the student union and bar staff, which I'm very proud of, and I continue to be part of that campaign across the university. So my record at Birkbeck shows I'm fighting for students. My record over the last 2 years in terms of activism, I've helped in the 2010 student protests. I helped organise and steward those protests and was key in many of the protests and actions we did then, including direct actions and occupations and other things. In the last academic term, I've been basically on and organising every demonstration and march you can think of. In the last few months, we've had a successful feeder march of over 2,000 people from ULU to the trade union demonstration. We've had a 2,000 feeder march, 10,000 person march here from ULU again to the City of London on the 9th of November, where I was Chief Steward and helped to make sure that happened successfully. I've also been supporting workers and in their struggles in the university. Went to 11 colleges and went to 19 picket lines on this strike day on the 30th of November. I'm very proud to stand absolutely in solidarity with UCU and Unison when they strike, because they're trying to protect our education and our institutions. On education, I'll say I'm pleased that the government's postponed the white paper, but they've only postponed it. The government is systematically attacking people across the spectrum. They're attacking pensioners, disabled people, people who use the NHS, young people. There's no jobs for people. Wages are going down, prices are going up, housing is becoming more expensive, and this is a massive challenge. The government's decided to drop the HE white paper for now, but they're going to come back for us. I think we as students need to unite with all the other groups, with disabled people, with unemployed people, with workers, to ensure that the government don't get away with attacking them, and then they don't come back for us. So that's what I want ULU to be doing, and working with people like the Coalition of Resistance and other activist groups that unite people on a broader scale against austerity. So there's still a lot to fight for. In our own university, we've got a private college starting to try, that's parasiting on our degrees, the New College of Humanities. As president, I will sit on the committee that accredits external institutions which teach the external programme, and I'll be saying that New College of Humanities should never get preferred partner status under any circumstances, and the university shouldn't work with them. I've already told them, as ULU Vice President, we won't be working with them. Okay. Vote Sean Laronchka #1 if you want a campaigning ULU, if you want to see us out on the street, if you want to see us organising marches, and if you want to see us at the forefront of resistance to the government's austerity agenda. Thank you. Oh, do I stand here for questions anyway?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sean. Sean Laronchka, the first candidate for
the tip of the iceberg.
The other candidate in this election is reopen nominations. They do not get a 3-minute speech. Are there any questions, Hashem?
Yes. There is one question that's directed at Tool, and that is, what do you think of ULU BDS policy?
What do I think of ULU BDS policy? Well, the one thing I didn't have time to mention there was what I believe about international relations, and I think we should be showing solidarity across the world with the revolutions in the Middle East, with people fighting for their own self-determination and independence anywhere, including, say, Scotland, for example. So I'm absolutely pro BDS. I think I was either myself or James Hayward put the motion to Senate last year. I've held a meeting of over 300 students for the BDS campaign. That's Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions, if people don't know. And we had a very successful rally there. We're forming a network, hopefully, of all the Palestine societies, which I'm working on as part of my Liberation Network, which was a promise I made last year. So, in short, fully behind ULU, having international solidarity and saying that we're pro-BDS.
Thank you. Are there any supplementary questions from the floor that you'd like to ask the candidates?
Sorry, I'm just writing them.
No, you can just ask it directly. It's related to BDS and things like that.
Oh, no, it's not. Sorry.
Oh, right, okay.
I thought Ashley said there's only one.
Any supplementaries related to BDS? Boycott,
Divestment,
sanctions.
don't get that wrong.
There aren't. Okay. Yes, we've got
Do
one
you think
there.
that's a positive way of campaigning for the liberation of the Palestinians? And how do you think that's a positive way?
The Palestinian people are living in a stateless place. They haven't got the opportunity to have to decide their own destiny. They're in basically a prison camp under the Israeli government. I don't support that government. I don't support any of our neoliberal capitalist governments in the world, and I want it. I want it to go, and I want Palestinian people to have their freedom. Me buying Israeli goods doesn't help that in my view. So I do think it's a positive way of helping Palestinian people. I think militancy against the state of Israel is a very positive thing. Be
It
that.
feeds into the hands of the right wing, though. Makes it harder to create unity between the Palestinians and Jewish.
I think if you see what's going on to people on the ground where their houses are being bulldozed and they're being shot in the head, I don't think there's going to be much unity anytime soon if we just pussyfoot around the issue. We've got to say, as ULU and our government, if they ever got the guts to do it, that what Israel is doing is fundamentally wrong. We don't accept it, and there's no negotiation on that, and that's it for me.
Happy? Hold on.
I'm
Any
not
further,
happy, but I've asked the question.
further
No one
questions
else
on
has
BDS? I think Freya has a written one, as it were, but you can ask it directly.
Okay, I'll just answer.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, you talked a lot about activism on a national and even a global scale in your statement. I was wondering, in terms of the day-to-day activities of students, things that might seem small in comparison, like admin, feedback on work, things like that, that really actually contribute to the student experience. How you work to make sure that you can help those issues with the other unions around London?
Admin and feedback. I mean, I think
Not particularly those issues,
what will
but the
help-
day-to-day
yeah.
studying.
Well, what will help students is us just to put forward that there's a different type of education. I think our university is not acceptable as it is. I'm not campaigning to keep the university as it is. I think it's a deeply bad institution. It's elitist, homophobic, sexist, racist. I don't think it's what we want to preserve. So I think the most pressing concern for students is, and indeed those potential students and people who should have the opportunity to study, as we all should, is how they engage with that, and that's the most important thing for me. But there are things we're doing, like putting a motion to Senate opposing the National Student Survey and working with UCU on ways of alternative assessment, because I believe that things like the NSS are basically hokum, and they make people big up their universities so their universities look better. It's total bullshit. So it's stuff like that on a day level that we want to oppose, to try and get a different idea of what people's education should be. There's so much we can do together now to make our own experience better. And when you go to an occupation and go to a film showing or a meeting where we discuss things together, that's the kind of thing I think will benefit students. And I do oppose in detail and daily university management on a range of very complex issues. I mean, Bert Beck, I'm a governor. I oppose, and put forward different things on fees, on bursaries, on room bookings, on you name it, sickness policies, everything.
Any further questions? Can be related to that, supplementaries on that particular issue. That's why I kind of cut it off. There isn't. Any further written questions at all? There are. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you. Very disappointed.
Okay, for Ian's benefit, we did the draw for the speaking order. First will be Ross, second will be Daniel, third will be Abs, and fourth will be Ian. Okay? You will have 3 minutes, each candidate speaks, and then there will be written questions, and after each written question, the candidate gets an opportunity to reply, then there will be open forum. And I will cap when there's 30 seconds left for a candidate to speak, but I'll just cut you off so you can finish your point. Okay, I'd like to welcome Vice President candidates to speak first. Ross, if you'd like to make your way to the front. After you've introduced yourself, I will then start the clock. You've got 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Ross Spear. I'm a third-year history and politics student at Queen Mary, and I'm standing for Vice President as a candidate with the skills, the experience, the strategy and the politics necessary to make this into an institution that works on behalf of and engages with the students of the University of London. And as an incumbent ULU trustee, I know how a student union works. And in my 2.5 years at Queen Mary, I played a leading role in organising activists to fight against the education cuts, to bring out students onto demonstrations, to bring them onto the picket lines with UCU. And I think we need to roll this out across the University of London. We are facing a massive fight ahead of us as students. We can still repeal the fee rises. We need to fight against the education white paper. The government may have said that they'll repeal it, but many of the measures are still going forward. As ULU, we need to act as a counterweight to the right wing in the NUS and force them into a position of organising a national demonstration in the autumn to bring out thousands of students to fight against what this government is doing. And for this reason, I think we also need to defend the right to protest, because students have been subjected to intimidatory policing and unfair jail sentences for their role in protest. And we can use ULU to provide a support mechanism for them and actually stand up for these people, for the injustices that they are suffering, for standing up for their right to a good and decent education. And I mean, I don't think cuts are the only struggle ahead of us, as very important as they are. We're also facing a rancid far-right resurgence in the form of the English Defence League. And as a proud member of Unite Against Fascism, When the English Defence League came to Tower Hamlets in September, I was at the forefront of resistance of fighting them. And I think we need to make universities and the University of London safe spaces for people of all colours and creeds and fight against this insidious threat and make sure they are not allowed on our campuses, to no platform them wherever they come. And I think students, other issues also matter to students, international issues. There are many international students within the University of London, and Palestinian liberation is something that I feel very strongly about. And I reject the idea that our student institutions do not have a role to play in this struggle. Actually, we can do something about this, and I think ULU needs to do what it can. I'm proud that ULU has voted for a BDS motion. We need to uphold this policy, we need to strengthen it, and we need to take these kind of struggles forward. So vote Ross Spear, number 1, for Vice President of ULU.
Thank you. That was Ross Spear, candidate for Vice President. The second candidate is Daniel Lemon Cooper. So introduce yourself. Yeah, that's fine, absolutely. You have 3 minutes after you've introduced yourself.
Very Churchillian, finally forget.
Please don't heckle the candidate.
It wasn't
Or talk to the candidate while they're about to address you. After you've introduced yourself.
Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Cooper. I'm the current president of Royal Holloway Students' Union and Associate. I'm standing this election because I want to build a powerful student movement in London. I've helped to do that at my own campus, and I want to bring this to you as well. Look, you hear that student unions should be political. I say student lives are political. We work, we face cuts, we face austerity, racism and discrimination in all of our campuses. If ULU is going to help change student lives for the better, it needs to fight. I'm the candidate that's led political fights and won. So last term at Royal Holloway, there was an announcement of about 30 job cuts. The student union, the anti-cuts group on campus launched a campaign. We linked up with campus trade unions. We took action, demonstrated and occupied. We were uncompromising. And the result was that management backed down and withdrew the cuts. We were organised, we were political and we won. That's the organising approach I want to bring to you. My politics start with democracy, real mass grassroots democracy. Currently, most students see ULU as a building with some services, with some facilities, with only like sabbatical officers that are involved. I want to open ULU up so it becomes a tool for students on every London campus to use it as a battle for battles against their fees, against their cuts, against their privatisation. That means opening up ULU up to affiliation from institutions like London Met, to where fee colleges have acted as the backbone of the student revolt in 2010 and over the winter of 2010. It should be the organising centre for the London student movement. Look, I've transformed my union to play that role, and I want to do it the same as at ULU. I'm standing this election as a socialist. That means fighting for a world where the needs of the majority come before the needs of the profit. That's why I've organised as part of the GMB in Kingston with trade union recognition and working on winning better rights for working students on campus. The situation for young people today is scandalous. I want to run campaigns of work across London. This also includes a campaign for decent, affordable housing for all across London. Soaring rents, rip-off landlords and deteriorating halls of residence shouldn't be a commonplace. It's my socialist politics which have animated my work at Royal Holloway, building anti-racist and anti-fascist campaigns alongside our ACS, our Islamic Society and Jewish Society and campus trade unions. It's my socialist politics that form the basis of my campaigning alongside the Feminist Society and various other groups to tackle sexism, homophobia and transphobia. I believe that those oppressions must be combated as part of a fight to change a system that generates them. You don't have to vote for me, you don't have to be a socialist to vote for me, but you do have to believe that students can't win battles to defend and extend their rights without uncompromising activist campaigns that are based on grassroots democracy and mass participation. Vote for me and let's turn ULU into an organising hub for campaigns which will turn the tide against the cuts making, free marketeering, education as a commodity, bosses that run all of our institutions. This year in my union we've beaten back those bosses. Elect me and together we can beat them on every campus in this city.
Thank you very much. That was Daniel Lemon Cooper, candidate for Vice President, and the second to speak. The third person to speak, candidate for Vice President, is Abs Hassanada. You have 3 minutes after you've introduced yourself.
Hi, my name is Abs and I'm hoping to be your next University of London Union ULU Vice President. I'm a third year BA Philosophy undergraduate. I study at Heathrow, Queen Mary's and SOAS, so I know what it means to be an intercollegiate University of London student. I have been an elected ULU trustee for 2 years now, so I know what this job is all about and what it takes. And that goes from knowing the small things like the building, the ULU management, to knowing the bigger things like ULU's campaigns and the direction it's headed in. That means that if elected, my first day as your Vice President will not be a training day or a handover, it will be getting the job done for you. And for anyone who has doubts, let me assure you the student movement is far from over. We all realize that everyone should be able to choose the right university for the right course, not one that is more affordable. We need now, more than ever, even more nurses, more historians, and more graduates to invest into the future of our nation's economy. But ULU has to take a new direction that takes on board the views and needs of more students. A new direction that puts students, not politics, back at the heart of our movement. A new direction that learns from the lessons of the past and builds on a positive future. Though many of us show an interest, there are more students we could reach out to and get involved. So next year we'll listen harder and work harder for students across London. However, I do not just stand before you today based on some ideals of wanting to achieve, but having achieved already. I know what it's like to engage with students from the small and specialist colleges like Heathrow and be part of the bigger ones like King's and UCL. When I arrived at university, no one ever had a thought of running for ULU, let alone actually winning. Having been a ULU trustee, we have introduced a new constitution and established a strategic framework which outlined the path ULU will be taking over the next few years, and now I wish to see that through. We have campaigned for a London living wage and have been successful, but now I wish to expand this by bringing ULU to your colleges and your universities, because I believe that students deserve a decent pay for the hard work that they do. Many challenges remain, but together, with your vote, we can make that better change for students possible. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was Ab's candidate for Vice President. The fourth and final candidate to speak for the election of Vice President is Ian Drummond. Ian, after you've introduced yourself, it's 3 minutes.
Hi, brothers and sisters, friends. I stand before you as an activist and a socialist and an anti-imperialist now for the best part of a decade. I got involved in politics the first time when I walked out of school aged 15 against the Iraq War, which hadn't started yet, and 9 years on, I've never looked back from that. I'm a grassroots campaigner. I was at SOAS for 4 years. Now I'm at Birkbeck College. I might as well say this and be open about it. Even in this election, which we're holding early, in order for only people who really care about ULU to stand, and as a ULU senator from Birkbeck, I was one of those who argued strongly in favour of that. Even in this election, where all the candidates care about ULU unimpeachably, haven't just lost at their home institution and they're standing for a second chance, as has happened in other years. I think I've got a particular locus, a particular story that makes me care passionately about ULU, in that I was worked over by the management a couple of years ago when I won the ULU Vice President elections, and 5 months later the management reinstated somebody who'd been disqualified for cheating in order to keep me out, really. And so I'm particularly committed to reforming ULU's constitution. I think ULU's done a fantastic job in the last couple of years with sabbaticals like Sean and Claire in fighting for students in the student movement, and that's what I want to continue doing as an activist at ULU. But I also think that we still have a Byzantine, bureaucratic, unaccountable structure that I want to overhaul, even from small things, like the fact that the sabbatical office is still behind the buzzer. I've been a grassroots activist for almost a decade. I don't want to sit behind the buzzer like management. I want to get rid of the buzzer and have my door always open to students. I don't see why we've still got a hole in the wall charging students, whatever it is, almost £1 every time they want to withdraw some money. That's something that most people have abandoned doing now that they can get it free so many other places. So there's all sorts of anachronisms. Those are kind of small ones almost. Much more importantly, we need to reform our whole constitution, make sure that jiggery-pokery of the kind that happened to me never happens to anybody else, and to connect ULU with students, be there on campuses, building the movement, and now that there's a threat of war against Iran, turn ULU into a hub of opposition to any threats of war against Iran or Syria. And we have to be an internationalist college. We have to be fighting for students on the ground. We have to link up with the struggles of cleaners fighting for a living wage, which are still denied at Senate House. We also have to link up with the struggle for justice in the wider world, including abroad. Vote Ian Drummond #1 for ULU Vice President.
Thank you. That was Ian Drummond, candidate for Vice President. Just to remind you, the first candidate to speak was Ross Spear. The second candidate to speak was Daniel Cooper. The third candidate to speak was Abs Hassan Ali. And the fourth candidate to speak was Ian Drummond. We're now going to move into written questions. To remind you, the written question will be read out by Hesham. Each candidate will then have an opportunity to reply to that for 1 minute. Again, I will tap on the table when there's 30 seconds left. There will then be an opportunity for open forum from the floor, supplementary questions to which you can ask any candidate. We will do it in reverse order. To start with, you read the question out, and then the first to speak will be Ian, second Abs, third. If you would like to come to the front, why not? Let's have a line-up. Oh great, we've got 4 questions, so that's kind of like each one starting first. So.
The first question is...
Can they be in the speaking?
Yeah.
Right, first to speak is Ian. Second to speak is Abs.
Ross and
So Ross and Dan have got to switch around.
So the first question is, racism, Islamophobia and fascism are on the rise across Europe. Following last year's shameful and outrageous attack on UAF at NUS conference, do you pledge to continue ULU's pride record of working with UAF to fight fascism?
Indeed I do, and if I have anything to say about it at all, then that shameful decision of NUS conference will be reversed. This decision, in case some people in the room don't know, was when an ultra-left sect put forward a motion attacking Unite Against Fascism from a critique of the wildest extremes of the Trotskyist left. The hard right leadership of NUS all blocked behind it in a classic pincer movement to de-link from the anti-fascist movement, not because it's too right-wing to be anti-fascist, as some of the lunatics who were moving the motion said, but because they don't want to get their hands dirty in the radical campaign against racism and fascism and Islamophobia. And it was an absolute disgrace. It was narrowly moved last year. It can be reversed this year. I think that basically some people say it's shameful that Unite Against Fascism as David Cameron is a member. Don't be even more right-wing than David Cameron by opposing Unite Against Fascism.
That's me.
Quite simply, yes. I don't think we should have racism or Islamophobia on our campuses. Quite simply.
Next.
Do we have 1 minute?
Yeah, you've got a minute. Abs took 9 seconds. You've got a minute.
Well, I completely agree with that because I think, Islamophobia, etc. are abhorrent. I think like the EDL are disgusting, it opposes Islamic extremism as a theme cover for anything that doesn't follow a narrow parochial conception of their own Britishness. Now, it seems to be like a discussion about how to take on fascism becomes something about the whole organisation, whether we should affiliate, etc. I'd like to focus upon one specific area about, a discussion about whether UAF and whether it's good enough. One of the questions of democracy, is it open there are internal discussions about its direction and who can be involved. I don't think it certainly doesn't. And also a reliance on the state, where UAF for a long period of time called for bands to be banned. The march was banned, and then marches across London were banned themselves. I think we need to understand that the state isn't neutral, it works in favour of bosses, and we shouldn't rely on them to tackle fascism.
Well, really how to follow Ian on the subject. I identified myself as a UAF member in my initial speech, and I think it would be a very good thing for ULU to work very strongly with this organisation to fight the EDL, because I think what UAF do is put forward a coherent strategy of how to beat fascism. I do have to agree with Dan on one thing, and that is I don't support state bans on the EDL, because what happens is the state bans not only the fascists but also the anti-fascists. What I support is mass mobilisation to combat them on the streets. But, however, within UAF, it is a democratic organisation. I would argue within UAF not to support state bans, such as the trappings of democracy. We may not always win that argument. But I think regardless of some possible slight deficiencies, UAF has put forward a clear strategy of how to beat the EDL. We need to take that forward with ULU, protect our students from this insidious threat, and make sure they are not on our campuses, they are not in our communities, and we do beat back the far right.
Thank you, candidates. Any supplementary questions? I see one, I see two.
So, one of the candidates mentioned the state and had a question about the state and Islamophobia. I'd like to ask the candidates what they have done and what they would do as ULU Vice President to defend, in particular, Muslim students from the kind of activities that this state has taken part in, whipping up Islamophobia in the obvious way that David Cameron did in his speech in Munich, of all places, last year, and then more insidiously, the kind of spying and authoritarianism, the creeping sort of surveillance that we've seen of Islamic societies across London. I'd like to know what they have done against this and what they will do if elected.
Is there a candidate you have to answer that first?
Well, it's to all of them, really.
To all of them, okay. Well, in that case, we'll just go down the queue. So Abs to answer first, and then down, then Ross and then Ian.
In terms of what I have done, I'm a Muslim myself. I know what it's like on campuses, and because of that, I've seen it happen, and we've had fought against it in our various campuses as being a ULU trustee. And I would like to take that further and think issues like this have to sometimes be dealt with on the streets. Yeah.
So I guess what concretely have I done to tackle Islamophobia on my campus, where we have a large number of Muslim students. I think throughout my period of about 4 years of being there, I've worked every day with Muslim students and worked very closely with the society. We passed policy this year against the government's Prevent agenda, which saw the police coming onto campus and looking to survey Muslim students to take up details about them. We ran our first ever anti-fascist campaign that Royal Holloway has ever seen, that linked up with ISOC, with the Islamic Society, Jewish Society, Sikh Society, etc. We held meetings, we debated ideas, we went into Feltham in the local area with trade unions to campaign against fascism. I think my record is very clear as an anti-fascist campaigner, what we've done at Royal Holloway and what we've done in Surrey as well.
Thank you. Ross?
Well, I think much of what has been mentioned in this question falls under what the government calls its prevent strategy, which is the idea that the Muslim community has to get its own house in order. I mean, I think this idea is patently quite ridiculous, the idea that extremism is a problem in the Islamic community. Of course, we have to fight the state on this subject. Now, I think what ULU needs to do is work with his partner student unions within the University of London to fight against this failed strategy of the government that even seeks to encompass what it calls non-violent extremism. Well, I ask you, what is non-violent extremism? The definition is so broad as to attack anybody that it wants to. I also think what I mentioned in my initial speech about defending the right to protest, standing up for students that are attacked in this manner, this is something that's also got to be rolled out in that respect. ULU needs to act as a support mechanism to combat where the state attacks our Muslim students. We need to mobilise people, and we need to use the resources ULU has to fight against this.
Thank you. Ian?
Yeah, as a member of Stop the War and other organisations like Respect and Viva Palestina, I'm proud to say that all of my political activity has been in tandem with Muslims since when I got involved in politics till now. The Muslim community has been demonised in order to fight the war abroad. They've started a war at home and turned the Muslim community into the new Jews or the new Irish, to be the whipping boy for every excuse to get people off their own backs in order to scapegoat them. As Vice President of ULU, I'd use ULU as a support mechanism. I'd also use it to be a big voice in solidarity with the politics that I've already got. I'm currently supporting a sabbatical, a Muslim sabbatical, where they're trying to push out at University of East London. I was involved in SOAS a few years ago when we decided that we're going to oppose the prevent strategy and tell students and teachers don't spy on Muslim students, and that's something I'd roll out all across ULU if elected.
Thank you. And another supplementary here.
Will any of the Vice President's candidates be coming to UAF conference on the 20th of February, where they'll be electing their national committee?
Okay, we'll start with Dan going that way, then this way. Very quick, yes or no answer, please.
No.
No, I don't intend to.
Ross?
Yes.
What a waste of the question.
And Ian.
I look forward to taking part in the vibrant democracy of UAF when I attend its conference on the 25th of February.
Yeah, okay, we're moving on to the next written question. I'm going to ask Hesham to read out 2 written questions so that you will have 2 minutes to answer each of you. We will start with Dan.
You start again with me.
Yeah, we just ask Ross now, so, and then it'll be Ross, and then back down this way, and then it'll go to Nathan.
Okay, 2 questions. The first question is, the Vice President's position has different responsibilities to President. How do you support sports and societies in ULU? And the second question is, if the student body that you represent show themselves to disagree with your personal politics, will you still work to represent their best interests? Emphasis in this question is on their.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the first point it's important to put not to a mechanical separation of powers between President and Vice President. Actually, I think obviously these sabbatical officers have to work very closely together. But it is in this respect true, for instance, sports and societies falls under the Vice President's remit. Now, I think the principle in this respect I would like to realise is from each has his ability to each has his need. Now, what that really means is using sports in 2 manners. Now, that's to develop mass participation of people of any skill level, but also promoting excellence. Now, really what ULU needs to do here is fit in where other student unions, where they are lacking in certain respects. And I think we need to work very closely with them as a partner institution and not as competition. For instance, a very good initiative being rolled out at Queen Mary called Get Active, which involves people at very, very low cost in sports on a mass basis, whatever their skill level. I think that's something we can work to generalise across the University of London. Could you repeat the second question, please?
Yes, the second question was, if students disagree with your personal politics, will you still work in their best interests?
Yes, well, of course, I'm being elected to represent students. Now, should they choose to elect me, and then I would follow the political direction given to me by Senate, which is the political oversight of ULU. That said, I am running on a very clear manifesto, and I would hope people would vote for me because of those politics. If things were to change in my term in office, I would be bound as a representative of ULU to follow that.
I'll take them in reverse order, if I may. I would rather be impeached than stand up and be a big voice for a pro-Israel, pro-war on Iran, and so on campaign. I am not standing in order to represent every single view, because that's impossible. There'll always be difference. We're not North Korea. The only leader who ostensibly stands up for everyone in the country who all think with one mind is Kim Jong-un, and I'm almost as old as him. I think we all are, but a bit thinner. No, I will always stand up for the best interests of all students, but I understand that that will be seen even by me through the filter of my own politics. I think it's not in the best interest of students to pay £9 grand in fees, and I'll be standing up against fees throughout my term, as well as supporting all students, whatever their political views, in pastoral work in terms of all the difficulties that come up. But as Ross said, I've got a pretty clear manifesto. If people like it, vote for me. If they don't like it, vote against me though. And the problem is there's no one standing from the hard right this year to vote for if they want that kind of politics. Secondly, on the question of the differences between President and Vice President roles, I'm in favour of constitutional reform at ULU. The last constitutional reform we had at ULU was a bit of a mess until pretty recently. We had more than 2 sabbatical officers with the variety of roles more apportioned out, and I think that's something we should look into getting back. To just have the President and the Vice President, there's always going to be a blurring if there's only 2, and if me and Sean were in, we are both activists, we'd both be involved in standing up for students in campaigns. The main difference is between external campaigning, being public face, and internal campaigning, reconnecting ULU to students on the ground for the Vice President, and that's what I did.
I don't think it's just specific to ULU, but with any student officer or sabbatical at any student union, you're there to represent students, and that comes in the form of both campaigning and providing services. So I will campaign for students and also provide better societies, expand what we already have here, get more students engaged, work with other intercollegiate colleges to do tournaments and cups. And in terms of disagreements, I don't think one runs for these elections without knowing that the possibility that people will along the way disagree with you. That's part of student politics, and if elected, that's for Senate to decide. It has all these policies and they put the political agenda. But I've seen it in my current 2 years as ULU trustee as well that people have disagreed on a daily basis, and I would enjoy taking that forward and working alongside other students from other colleges so we can make it better engaging and a better experience for students.
To take the question around whether if you were to questions of democracy, I think, like as I said in my speech, I'm a Democrat and someone who would take the decision from Senate. As has been said already, running on a clear platform of ULU being outward-looking, of it being political, and of being campaigning. My record at Royal Holloway suggests that's how I want to run things. But it's ultimately about democracy. You take things to Senate, and that's what should lead. I guess in terms of sports and societies, I think for a long period of time, ULU seems to have lacked a definition. It seems to be quite obsolete. And I think ULU's to unite students of a similar character, of a similar personality, if you like Harry Potter, than to meet someone who likes Harry Potter at Royal Holloway and SOAS, etc. And I think so it's supposed to act as that kind of second type of student union. And saying that, I've spoken to a lot of student activities officers in the last couple of months about what they feel and ULU can do better for them in terms of support, freshers' fairs and during the year. And all of them have said it's in a pretty derisory state where they don't get people coming to their campuses. They don't receive any support from any of the officers here. So I think we need to just get out onto campuses, provide some support to them, and build on there.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, we're now going to go to supplementaries on that. I've got one here, which was a written question, but it fits in quite nicely with this. After the bombing of Libya last year, the West now has its sights set on Iran and Syria. Do you pledge to work with the Stop the War Coalition to oppose these wars if elected? Again, I think a yes and a very short explanation would be fine. Let's start with Ian.
Yeah, I think I already did in my opening speech, and I'll stick to that.
I'm looking forward to working with coalitions of different organisations like this and see how we can better represent students.
I get points on working with Stop the War. I think ULU has a record of doing so. If students feel that that's the thing that they want to do, if it's democratically decided, we can certainly do that. And I think in terms of Iran, I'd like to say two things. One, we should oppose war absolutely. We should be unambiguous in that we don't support war in Iran. And the second point is that we should make solidarity with students, with workers in Iran, because it's an autocratic theocracy that hangs people, that's extremely undemocratic and authoritarian. So I think we should make those 2 points.
Ross.
Yes, absolutely. As I stated in my introduction, I think ULU should be an institution that plays a role in these things. Students were at the forefront of the struggle against the Iraq War, and so they should be again should the government choose to go to war. I think ULU has the potential to mobilise around these issues, and absolutely I would work very strongly with the Stop the War Coalition to do our best to make sure this country does not enter itself into another war.
Thank you. I'm slightly mindful of the time, so I'm going to ask for the final written question to be read out, and then we'll do a quick last supplementary, if that's all right.
The final question is, what would you do for working students in employment?
So can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. What would you do for working students, so students in employment?
I think I already highlighted on my speech that in terms of working students, we campaign for a London living wage, and I've done, because I believe that students deserve a decent pay for the work that they do. But I want to expand this into other colleges across London as well, and I'll be willing to do that. And just like any other student, I'm there to represent them.
So at Royal Holloway, we've run a student worker campaign this year that's involved, on one hand, making students aware of their rights at work, in terms of how they respond if they're receiving a cut in their wages, in conditions and what have you. And that's been through posters, meetings, etc. And more specifically, and something I'm quite interested in rolling out across London, it's a student worker campaign where we look to unionise student bar staff and students that work in shops, etc., etc. And there has been a colossal rise in the number of students working. They need the support, they need to be unionised, they need to be aware of their rights at work. So I think we should run that out across London.
Yeah, I think on the most general level, the best thing we can do for working students is actually defeat the massive attack the government is putting on higher education. If we were able to force through free education and better grants for students, then this would massively solve many of the problems they face. But in the short term, of course, we need to create ULU into an institution that students are able to turn to when they have problems with their employer. We need to create ULU into an institution that is fighting for the London living wage across the board for our students that are in employment. We also need to be making ULU into an institution that we're working with universities to make sure that students are accommodated and able to go into work without it impacting their studies.
Yeah, as the campaigns officer at Birkbeck College, which is a night college for working people, I've got experience in working with working students. I think there's going to be a lot more working students at all colleges this coming year, with £9,000 fees coming in. And as Ross just said, that the main way to liberate people from that burden of debt and the need to work to pay off all these debts would be to defeat the government's fee strategy, which is the long-term goal that I think under any of us ULU would have. And in the meantime, we will do the pastoral work. We will try to organise people into trade unions, and we'll also, under myself at least, build solidarity between working students and other workers on campus, fighting for a living wage for student staff, but also for the cleaners, without whom we wouldn't be able to go to our lessons because it would all be too filthy, who, at least in the University of London, though not many other individual colleges anymore, are still not being paid the London living wage. And as a ULU senator, I've got a motion on that tomorrow morning, so I'm already on the case of that.
Lovely, thank you. Any supplementaries at all? Any of those questions that just... No, okay, thank you very much, candidates. Those are the candidates for Vice President.
It's pretty warm in here, so
It is roasting.
Yeah. I can see the level of condensation rise from near the bottom to the very top. Which?
BDS.
Yeah, let's get up and do that.
Go to all candidates.
I'm sorry, but that's like the ultimate stitch up. Like, if you want to just ask me, please, stop being disingenuous. Don't just ask me about questions.
They ask questions at the beginning. You can't see it.
I was just asking when it's that BDS. Everyone knows.
We'll come up here and take come and have a go.
Sorry, can we have a little bit of order now? I'm chairing this proceedings, and I was going to move on to the Hustings for London Student Editor. I've asked the candidates to sit down. I should probably have taken, I think Eshan did say, asked in supplementary notes. Now, we are taking, speaking of John Bell first, followed by Jen Isaacson. Third to speak will be Ben Holmes. Fourth to speak will be Wilma Burtons, and fifth will be Freya Pascal. Again, you will have 3 minutes to speak. All candidates will speak in that order. We will then ask some written questions. We will take them in rounds of 3 this time, and then we'll do the supplementaries. Again, the written questions just need to be so that every candidate has an opportunity to answer, but supplementaries can be directed towards one or more candidates. Okay, if John would like to come to the front.
Just before John starts, does anybody want paper for questions?
Can I have some paper?
After you've introduced yourself, John, you've got 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm John Bell. I'm a third-year economics student at UCL, and I am also the current editor of a small UCL publication called the Cheese Grate magazine. And I would like to be one of the student editors because I think I would be absolutely terrific at the job. What I would like to do with the paper is really work hard to protect freedom of expression, not only within the paper itself and kind of get what the authors want to say and contributors what they want to say out into a broader distribution arena, but also I want to sort of assist all the London colleges in any way that I can. Sort of from experience, I know that sometimes with individual colleges and individual unions, you have issues with censorship, and I really want to use the London students' resources and the London students' distribution to challenge that in any way that I can. I would like to ensure. I want to ensure balanced reporting on the London student, and by that I don't mean that there isn't a place for campaigning authors or campaigning journalists. I just think that isn't necessarily in news. I think that's probably more in comment, and I really want to give people's voices the exposure they need. I also want to encourage better feedback and better training for all these section editors. Make sure that whenever an article is submitted to the London student, you get prompt feedback, kind of tips on how you can maybe improve your article, improve your writing style, improve your skills as a journalist. And I think that I'm ideally placed to do that because the Cheese Grater sort of is a quite intense, investigative and satirical section in itself. And I think there are a lot of things that I've learned over the last 3 years that I would be really effective in passing on to a batch of London student journos. I also want to sort of inject a little humour into the magazine, a little bit more character. I know that student politics sometimes loses a bit of perspective about itself, and I think that a more wry look at some of the things that are going on across the university and across education as a whole would sometimes not go amiss. What else do I want to do? What else do I want to do now? Go on. No, nothing. I'm sorry. I've been up all night editing my own publication, and I honestly think that I would be terrific at this job. I've learnt a lot during my 3 years at the Cheese Grater, and now I want to bring that to the London student, bring the London student forward.
Thank you very much. That candidate was John Bell. The second candidate to speak for Editor London Student is Jen Isaacson. After you've introduced yourself, Jen, you've got 3 minutes.
Hi everyone, my name is Jen. I'm a Master's student at LSE and I'm also a part-time student at Birkbeck doing an evening course. A little bit about my experience. I started my own student paper during my undergraduate, I edited it for 2 years. Now I, partly with other students at LSE, set up a thing called the Penguin, which is an online magazine. It's basically made of individuals who decided that actually the Beaver on campus, after printing rape jokes, there needed to be something on campus that kind of raised the bar of journalism and meant that the Beaver couldn't just kind of really lower itself and lower the reputation of the college and print stuff that's basically unacceptable. On the issue of censorship, at the Penguin we did get just last week the AIDS Society wanted to print cartoons of Muhammad. I was one of the people that was instrumental in fighting this and saying that we couldn't even have a link on there. We didn't want to print the article that was also racist and called Islam a dictatorship. And so I think that actually when these things are done from below, when you work with the Islamic societies, it's not so much censorship as actually a political decision, and I simply think that those things shouldn't happen just behind closed doors normally. My vision of journalism is one that actually occupies a space in society that can challenge the ideology and government and mean that there is a certain mechanism that can be used by people from below. And this is how I see it basically. I think that there is a place for campaign journalism, absolutely. I think that London Student can be a platform for it and that can actually provide a space that is a kind of part of the repertoire of ULU as a kind of arsenal of the student movement. What does that really mean? It means that when you do news stories like the front page of Independent today, they did research into police violence, they found that actually police workers were wrong on it. Why did they conduct that research? That will have been a decision that someone have made to do that or something else. In terms of representation, I think that the way that we make sure that people are fully represented, we don't have representation just for the sake of it, we have representation for the underrepresented. It means that we have Black History Month, LGBT History Month, Women's Week, and in terms of my own liberation politics, I support no platform for the BNP, and this extends to print. I think that we should have articles on the BNP, we should ignore them, we should expose them, but they're the only group that I wouldn't allow space in the paper to just say, here's our politics, this is what we do. As like anyone else, because they're not like everybody else, they're a particular party, fascists. London students, like all of ULU, there are already rumours of it, will be facing cuts in the future. This happened 5-6 years ago. London Student was the first under attack. The editor at the time just said, oh, I'll take a pay cut. I actually think that more than anyone taking a pay cut, more than lowering the wages of staff, more than saying that we're going to accept this, I think that we have to fight the cuts, and that London Student can be a way to galvanise that. In terms of things that I'm sure people don't disagree on, technology, we all want an innovative website, we all want to get as many students involved. Particularly, I think that live streaming of demonstrations has become very popular this year. I would want to look into that. Also, NUS conference was screened and got over 20,000 hits. I think the London Student should embed it on this website.
Thank you. That candidate was Jen Isaacson. The third candidate to speak to you is Ben Parfitt. Ben, 3 minutes after you've introduced yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Parfitt. I'm a master's student at UCL and I went to Royal Holloway last year. I believe that London students should be an active and immediate voice for ULU students, for all ULU students. London students should be an inclusive paper where all views are aired. That includes first years, postgraduates, mature and international students alike. It's your paper and I want your voice heard. To increase involvement, I'll introduce campus editors across the University of London. Campus editors will be charged with distributing the newspaper, holding regular campus meetings, finding stories, and feeding back to me. This will increase the number of copies distributed, it will ensure fair coverage across the entire University of London, and it will enable better feedback. I'll seek to build on the work of previous editors and editorial boards to make consistency in the paper. This will involve building on the recent redesign and furthering missions for impartial and responsible reporting. I'll add new publications to the existing London student portfolio. This will include a high-quality magazine to bring in in-depth features, photography and art. I'll also introduce a satirical pull-out titled London Eye, which we ran, I think it was the previous editorial board, ran one issue of and was quite successful, to add a slice of humour to an otherwise serious paper. Adding on the work of previous editorial boards, I pledge to bring you a print evolution, but also pledge a digital revolution. In the 1990s, London Student underwent its first phase of digitisation, being compiled on a computer, then printed out as negatives and being ferried to the printers by taxi. It then, in the 2000s, it then was entirely digitised in PDF and sent across. On to undertake a third phase of digitisation. This involves introducing mobile and tablet apps and utilising the website like it never has been before. All other candidates also pledged to make London Student more digital, more online, or more multimedia in one way or another. But I believe that London Student to make this happen. I'm the only candidate to specify that I will develop iPhone, iPad and Android apps. Furthermore, I've already published considerably more content on the London Student website than any other candidate before you. I have filmed sports matches, live blogged NUS conference and reported live on student protests. Amidst this excitement, it's important to remember that London Student is a newspaper first and foremost. I recognise that print is not dead, far from it. Knowing the value of what we already have, I call for and promise a print evolution, a digital revolution. I call on you to vote for an experienced editor, for a candidate who has worked on the paper more than anyone else stood before you. I'm an award-winning sport editor and columnist at London Student. I've live blogged, worked on videos and taken photographs of the paper. I've contributed to more than 6 student publications during my time at university, and I'm also working on some professional freelance work.
Please wrap up.
But most importantly, I have what it takes to produce a quality, consistent and progressive London Student. Vote Ben, Parfit #1 for your London Student editor.
Okay, that was Ben. He was the third person to speak to you for London Student Editor. The fourth candidate to speak is Wilf. Wilf. After you've introduced yourself, 4 minutes.
How you all doing? All right? You're a bit tired now, aren't we? Reaching the end of the old tether. My name is Wilf Mettons. I'm also at the end of my tether, for tonight at least. I go to SOAS, I do study of religions. I thank you all for coming here and listening to me. My plan for the London Student, well, let me not talk about that. I don't really know what I'm saying. Journalism's changing. It's undergoing huge changes. I've got a friend who recently started doing work experience with his BTEC in journalism, doing work experience with The Guardian, talking about how more of their resources are going into their website, and how much, you know, I mean, you've probably been on the Guardian.com, you know, they're just getting more and more writing out there. And this is very significant. This isn't just the newspapers all have a website now, some of which charge, some of which don't. This is very significant for the way we write. The passive journalistic voice is getting less common. You still see it in the sort of news section of our beloved London Student on the newspapers, but the passive voice, for those who don't know, is kind of a murder investigation was launched. But when you get opinion pieces where the writer is more of a kind of presence in it, and it takes a less objective, supposedly objective standpoint, you get an active voice, which is the police launched a murder investigation. So it's sort of, there's more agency in the active voice, and this is, journalism is changing. We're more aware of who's writing it. Blogs, vlogs, you know, dogs, all the other ones. The internet itself generating news. The buzzword for it is citizen journalism, and it is playing a role, as we've seen in events around the world, our own Occupy movement and in Syria and everywhere else. The web is playing a serious role. As Jen said, everyone is sort of obligatory. We're going to say something about technology, but I am going for this full help. This is open source journalism. I am going to explode this out onto the web. And it's not just about the web, because just expanding the website and having people be able to vote what issues get supported by the London Student, having people be able to submit more easily and that sort of thing isn't enough. We need a presence in the unis. I want London student societies in the unis. I want to recruit people to write articles. You know, I don't want the people that just approach London Student. I was surprised how many people hadn't heard of London Student when I went around the unis talking to people. But I want them not just to have heard of us, but us to have heard of them and say, hey, Lord Student, Mr. Joe Bloggs, can you write us an article on this latest murder case? Hey, Mr. Theoretical Physicist, can you write us an article about what the hell they're doing in that particle smasher in CERN? He's not going to be able to do that, he won't be able to understand it. He's going to need journalistic training. Journalistic training is going to be something that's going to be the centre of what I will provide. I want better training for the features editors, for the editors of the different sections, but I also want training for people who wouldn't normally be writing journalism. I want people who wouldn't normally think they could write for the London Student writing, and in that way we can access the skills we have out there and make the London Student the most highly qualified newspaper in the world.
Thank you. That candidate was Wilf Mertens. The fifth and final candidate to speak to you this evening is Freya Pascal, standing for London Student Editor. Freya, after you've introduced yourself, you have 3 minutes.
Right, hello everybody, I'm the last one. I'm Freya Pascal, I'm a third year philosophy student at King's. I think the main thing that I want to talk about this evening is the fact that the London Student is not about one person, not about whichever one of us gets elected. It's about many, many people and a lot of ideas, a lot of expertise, all being brought together in the best way possible. This is what I do and have done in all of my roles, which are many, and I'm only going to bore you with a few. I think one of the best things about this election actually is that we've got 5 really decent candidates. And I've already taken the time to look at their manifestos, chat to most of them, not all of them yet. I'm hoping to do that before the end of the campaign. And working on things like Ben and Jen's application, along with Wilf's open source things, working on the expertise of the student body could be excellent. I think John's experience in terms of censorship in student media is fascinating to hear about, and he's got the experience there. What I can do is collate all of this and bring it all together. Having managed a team of more than 100 people on KCR radio across print, video, radio, tech stuff, marketing, God knows what else. I've managed to bring everything together, and I'm the driving force behind things at the end of the day when we're going to sit down and say, how are we going to do this? That's a great idea, that's a great idea, they conflict, what's going to happen in the middle? That's where the editor comes in. My other experience is across, I've got a lot of print experience in terms of helping in the very background of both my university paper Raw and the London Student, into where I've been working as broadcast editor this year. I've got a lot of research experience in terms of what I've done with news organisations, and in terms of a very odd project I had with a cricket commentary company over the summer, which, back to my managerial experience, involved handling a load of middle-aged, slightly drunk cricket fans, but I got a programme out at the end of the day. I've got video experience. I've also got experience working with a lot of different colleges. I've been involved with the Student Radio Association, working with people over at ULIF, which are a tiny 150-person university, part of the University of London, over in Paris. They're having problems with their print and radio getting it out there, and I've been working with them to do things like that. I've been working with the LSJSN, now called the SJN, which I think is a very, very important thing where we can all work together. I'll just reiterate quickly, because I'm sure you're all very tired, that I think I would be an absolutely great person to stand up, be the decision maker, but also be able to listen to and bring together the ideas of what I'm sure will be a great team.
Thank you. That candidate was Freya Pascal. That concludes the candidate speaking to you as London Student Editor. We're now going to move over to Hesham. We'll take 3 written questions. If all the candidates can come to the front, if you can stand furthest from me, John, then next Jed, then next Ben, then Wilf, then Freya. And we'll start with Freya.
We only have 1 question so far, so if you do want to ask more questions, more paper. But the first question is, how would you cope with the decline of print media and budget cuts at ULU, including the London Student, as pullouts, app licenses, etc. cost money? So how would you cope with the decline of print media and budget cuts at ULU, including the London Student, as pullouts, app licenses, etc. cost money?
I think this is where I have a great strength. I've got a huge amount of experience across a huge amount of mediums. And incorporating all of that experience means that you can run on, as the radio station a year before I joined discovered, a very cheap dictaphone and a dodgy computer with a dodgy fan in creating podcasts and things like that. Broadcast journalism has now reached a point where anyone can do it for almost nothing. Literally all you need is a phone, you need a dictaphone, you need something to scribble on, and you can do it. It's possible to do things on a very, very low budget scale. Another thing I did with the slightly weird cricket company that I work with was actually run for no money whatsoever. So a lot of my time was working out how to do a lot of different things with odd bits of equipment we found lying around and things like that, working with different people to see how we could form deals, And so I think I've got the experience to be able to manage those kind of challenges.
Thanks, Mandy.
Yeah, same. I have a lot of experience also organising things on shoestring budgets, which is always a lot of fun. I'm a performer, I'm a poet and a storyteller. You can check out, I'm on YouTube, or MeTube as I call it, so you can see that I'm not just making it up. And I've organised gigs as part of doing that, I've done gigs in old churches and dilapidated Art Deco cinemas and stuff, and pulled things together and made things work, and borrowed sound equipment, and I know how that works. Bringing those things together, I've got organisational capabilities, and I'm a terrifyingly hard worker. But the other thing is contacts and making things work as people want to be involved in a project that has the right energy and dynamism with it. And my friend I told you about him before, he's doing work experience with The Guardian. He's already promised me that he will come and get involved and teach journalistic style writing to us, and teach us about sub-editing and all these other lovely tricks. So that's one person I've got on board. I've got another friend, he's a web systems manager, which sounds great, and it is great, and he said that he'll also come and make sure that I get this new web program, which I've never been able to set up myself, this new website set up so we can have systems like voting, so it can interlink with Facebook and with Twitter and all those other lovely technical plugins.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I don't think that print media is necessarily declining. If you look across the whole of London, there's so many free newspapers and magazines that you can pick up on the tube. So I think as a free newspaper, there's plenty of scope for London Student, and it's far from dead. In terms of stuff that I'm introducing, the satirical pullout, that would come from the existing 56 pages, so there'd be no extra cost. Also stuff like the applications of the magazine, they're merely opportunities to get more advertisement, more niche advertisement. An application would cost about £1,000 to launch, to set up, a set-up cost, and I envisage that being covered by a single sponsorship, and that should actually generate income rather than cost it. There's other papers across London, Felix at Imperial, it's very similar to London Student, it actually makes a profit year on year, and that's the sort of business model that I work towards.
Yeah, similar really. I don't think that actually it is in decline as much as people kind of talk about it being the last decade, but I would say that, still having a website with podcasts on it, with live streamed events, all these things, again, I think we all agree on, are really important. But I also think that just making sure that people actually know things out there. A lot of people that I speak to on my campus, and particularly Queen Mary, don't necessarily know where it is that you consistently get London Student from. So I think that making sure that you actually go out and speak to people and actually give them a paper and say, by the way, you should contribute to this, means that you won't just get students not actually knowing about it or thinking, oh, is there a website, I'm not sure, I haven't seen the print thing, and that you kind of interrelate them both. Yeah.
Well, from experience, the magazine I wrote for was won the UCL Union Publication of the Year Award 5 years out of the last 6 on a budget of about £300. So I know that good things can be done for almost no money, and I think the website particularly is an incredibly cheap and affordable way of getting news content into people's hands. But in addition to all these sort of highfalutin new ideas, I think that the traditional models of advertising revenue aren't necessarily broken. I know that this year in the London Student, one issue I think had half a page of paid advertising in it, and currently the new smart London Student website hasn't got any advertising on it at all, and so the homepage. Oh, whatever. No, oh, never mind.
The Ministry of Education, no, it doesn't matter.
But anyway, I think that before we need to start thinking about all these brilliant new ideas, we have to really get the fundamentals right, and I think I'm in a good position to do that.
Lovely, thank you. We've got 2 more written questions which we're going to take now, and we'll do supplementaries as we usual, so we'll take 3 written ones.
The first one's on a similar theme. With the decline of print and print advertising, how will you develop an effective web strategy? And the second one is, can you explain the difference between being a journalist and being an editor?
We'll start with Will, go that way, and then back to Fred.
Sorry, can you repeat the second question again?
Yes. Can you explain the difference between being a journalist and being an editor?
Okay, yes. All right. Yeah, I think I'll start with the second one. It's obviously very, very different. I write for the London Student. I've enjoyed it very much, and I've liked meeting people involved, and I've enjoyed learning to write like a journalist instead of like an essayist and a storyteller and a poet. It's a whole different technique to it, and it's about communicating things very clearly, but I can put a lot of my opinion in there, and I've written about the riots. I went to the Old Bailey, saw the Hilliard boys be tried, who called a policeman, supposedly called a policeman off a horse during the student troubles last winter. So that was, that's my thing, and I got to say what Wilf Mertens thinks about this and that and the other. But as an editor, I am definitely going to be taking a step back. I want to make a platform where the students of London meet. I want to make a place where we can bring our expertise together, our opinions, our diverse experiences. 100,000 students in London from overseas. I want a bigger breadth of things. I am not all of those things. I am just one person. To me, it needs to be a forum. So that is very much the difference. In terms of the web strategy, like I said, I do have to defer slightly to my friend Joe. I have been in conversation with him, perhaps eagerly, considering the fantastic other candidates that I'm running against. But should I be editor, I'm going to be working with him to make a platform, a website, which is not just a sideline thing that hangs onto the newspaper, which informs the newspaper itself, which is the hub of the newspaper itself. And the newspaper is informed very much by the website, so vice versa.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I want to say that print media isn't on the decline, as I said once again, for free newspapers. The Evening Standard recently went to being free. There's Shortlist magazine, which gets a huge amount of money. They don't actually make any money on their website, for example. So I think the money is coming from print media. So I think the web strategy is sort of a secondary thing, and I'd focus on print media to get the funding in. The difference between a journalist and an editor is there to make decisions. They decide what goes on the front page, what makes the paper. They bring the journalists together and their section editors together to then decide what the strategy for the paper will be. So it's a lot more of a managerial, diplomatic role, and also sort of having a hard line and making those hard decisions.
Is it two questions? Can I get the first one? And then finally get the second one, rather than just get confused.
Sure. One of the questions is, what is the difference between being an editor and being a journalist?
Okay. All right. So yeah, being an editor, you have to organise everything. You have to delegate. But you essentially kind of frame what the paper is, because you can't put 2 weeks of existence into a 2-weekly paper. You do have to select, and I think we simply have to be very clear about not just our own politics, but about what actually the paper would look like if we were editor. You can't be wholly objective, the same way you can't be fully subjective. It's a process of both. And I think it'd be very distinctive about what kind of paper I would have. It would be one that does take sides. It would take the side of students and interests, and that's different to their opinions. But yeah, so I think that as an editor, you simply have to kind of make certain decisions to be able to justify them. Whether that's you allow an article in that you think might be sexist, or whether you decide actually that you don't want to promote that sort of thing, provide a platform for it. You're accountable basically for everything. And as a journalist, not that you can do what you want, but you're only accountable for your own words. And what's the second question?
The second question says, with the decline of print and print advertising, how will you develop an effective web strategy?
I mean, I think that the web strategy we've kind of covered a bit, and the print stuff as well, but I think that when people talk about advertising, I'm actually quite wary about getting huge amounts of advertising funneled into London Student, because actually I think that a lot of the time people make a case for the cuts that way and say, well, now you've got enough money for London Student to function on its own, which you think, oh, okay, that's great, fantastic. But then what happens when an advertiser says, actually, I'm not going to have an advert in your paper because you published an article defending the Millbank occupation. You publish something not condemning the riots and actually in defence of the riots, that's defending violence. If you put this next to my advertisement, I'm going to take you to court for it, these huge companies. I do kind of worry about that a bit. So I simply think that you have to have it on top of the fundamental funding that is there to support it from ULU?
Being a journalist is all about going out there and chasing the story and getting what you want to say under the eyes of readers. Whereas being an editor is all about management and taste and judgment and style, and particularly at the London Student, it's about having that design, creativity, the nous, about what you want to do and knowing what you want your paper to look like and how you want it to read. And making sure that tone and that voice is consistent and authoritative throughout publication. Sorry, Ben, but print media is in decline, massive decline. I mean, even in London, we've gone from the London paper and London Light and the Evening Standard to just the Evening Standard. Across Europe, Sweden, Germany, France, all the free sheets are dying. And this is the fact of the world we're living in. And how do we deal with that? I think it's the website, and we have to be the first on the story wherever we can be, and never letting there be a day without a tweet, not letting people forget that we're there. It's about having people going to the London Student website all the time. I mean, apps and stuff, yeah, that's great, but it's about having the people who are there, who have the energy and the drive to run it. And I think that before we can get too ambitious, we have to really, really get the fundamentals right. And that's what I'll be seeking to do.
Can I just reply to that point quickly?
At the end, I'll very first.
Okay, I will start with the web and print question. I'm sad to say I do agree with John. Print media in its current form is on the decline. However, I think there is a role for it to adapt to the new wave of journalism that's coming across. Although people say now that we've got all this open source citizen journalism, things like that, that's something that a paper and everything that goes with it can draw upon, and it can actually be the signpost. It can be the signpost that says, have a look at this, or this has come up this week out of Twitter. Here is a selection of some of the things we found interesting. No one has enough time to be watching 10 news feeds, although I do sometimes try when I'm writing an essay. I think like we all do. Print can be there to bring all of this together in terms of, but it also needs to incorporate all these mediums. And I also have a lot of experience in terms of websites. I've managed the KCL radio website and 2 other websites at other jobs that I've worked at. I've also been, I think Jen's point about advertising and putting it against all articles and things like that, court and being taken to court is obviously something you're going to be worried about, especially if we get satire sections and things like that. I've been libel trained, I've been trained in defamation and things like that. Got experience there. In terms of difference between journalism and being an editor, being a journalist is so many things. It depends on the part of journalism. I've worked in news, I've worked in satire, I've worked in sport, I've worked in culture, probably some even odder stuff as well. I said before, as editor, I can manage a team. I know I can manage a team. I've done it before. It's about talking to people, it's about conflict resolution, which I've done quite a lot of, and bringing together the best product at the end of the day, and that's something I can do.
Thank you very much. Right, Ben has a question.
I just wanted to clarify that
that's fine. Go for it.
the paper is where the majority of the income comes from, and I think to say that print is dying would be to overstate it a little bit. And no one's come here for us and said that we're going to get rid of the paper. And I think it's incredibly important that this is primarily about the paper, which is why I put this emphasis on evolving it.
Of course, yeah.
I would say that the University of London as an institution is in the luxurious position where it can afford to subsidise a paper like this. And I think that it's a brilliant thing, and I'm a great admirer of the print, but in a wider context, you can't deny that it's struggling / dying.
But we do have a slightly special situation because we have, just from the fact that it's in every university and people can pick it up, and we have the ability, although in my mind it's not being used enough, to open up chains of communication between universities and London Student Office on an institutional kind of level. That means that we do get a kind of secure distribution, which means it makes it quite appealing for advertising. So although I do agree with you with the sort of general decline, I think we're in a kind of special position that we can capitalise upon to sort of maximise the revenue from the paper. Absolutely.
Any final points from the candidates on that point before the supplementary from the floor on this point?
I'm just asking this question unofficially as a ULU trustee and London Student Management Committee member, because we've heard a lot about advertising, and I'm slightly astonished, really, because it seems to me the candidates haven't really looked into the advertising potential. ULU funds the London Student. It's not funded by advertising. Advertising puts a small amount of money into the London Student. ULU funds are being cut, and London Student is over budget. And print media clearly is in decline in terms of newspaper sales. It's in crisis. Young people and their engagement with that is also in crisis. Bar quality paid for advertising, say in New York Times or stuff like that. Bar quality journalism like New York Times are places where you pay. And advertising revenue is in crisis. There's no longer BAM, the major student publications people can't even get us a wraparound advert for the London Student now. It's just not possible. We're going into a recession. So I'm quite concerned that there's a lot of, we looked into an app. It's £4,000 to license an app for iPad, iPhone. This is money the London Student literally doesn't have. So my question is, how can the London Student editor live within the budget that ULU's got, which is cuts as is? We couldn't afford any extra supplements this year, for example. It will bankrupt the newspaper if that occurs. So I wonder how you can respond to that.
I don't know who to start with on that one. Let's start with Ben. Yeah, okay.
I think the key is getting upfront advertising. I know, speaking to journalists across London, that advertisers allocate their funding quite early, and for a London student to take over in August, it's just too late to secure that funding for the year. I'm sure people here would agree. If I was elected, I would look for advertising straight away and secure that big money up front. I know Felix, Imperial, for example, makes a profit. It doesn't rely on its union for funding, and that's because they do work consistently from editor to editor, from year to year, and that they do go out up front very early and get these big deals.
Who else wants to go next? Jen?
I think that if you have enough connections, actually, you can find ways to get these things done. I suppose because I'm a student activist, whatever, it means that I have been around for a while, and I know lots of different people with different skills. So I know the guy who designed the website a few years ago. He did it for about £100. It was about 1.5 to 2 months work, but he did it because he was a student and he was willing to do that. Now he's graduated, he works for a company. I'm sure that he would be willing to do it again, actually, because it's something that he was involved with. He was involved with London Student. In the same way that at LSE, we got an app designed for free by a student. I think that he'd probably do it very cheaply for London Students. So I think it's just about knowing people and finding different ways around things rather than just taking the commercial price at face value. I just want to mention about advertising as well. I think it really comes down to ethics. I think that we should definitely have some sort of policy, maybe it's set by Senate, or negotiate some other way, where we don't just have a free-for-all in terms of advertising what we'll accept.
I would very much like to echo Ben's thoughts, actually, just kind of really getting on it early and making sure that we're kind of on top of the situation as soon as possible, and there's this kind of handover process between Hesham and the next person. But also, in addition to that, I think there are cost-saving measures that the London Student could take already. For example, pushing for 56 pages of content sometimes feels unwise. Occasionally, when you're reading the London Student, it feels stretched. I mean, honestly, if you were to prioritise quality over quantity, you could publish a shorter paper, you could save a lot of money, and it wouldn't necessarily cut advertising revenues at all. And it might even give students a better read in the process. There are things that you can think about that would make this a lot easier to cope with.
What's the point of order? Is the Felix editor paid?
Yes.
London Student editor it is, and London Student editor cost is £25,000 on cost.
Yeah, they are paid.
Felix editor
Yeah.
paid as well.
Wilf? Fred?
I think there's a scope for a lot of options. I've already spoken to some people from the London Student team this year about advertising and things like that in parts of meetings and things like that. And there are possibilities. I agree with these guys about getting in there early. In terms of the paper, I think it's worth discussing with all different editors and things like that, and working on whether we need the full 56 pages.
There is also a lot of scope for talking to your contacts. If you chat to people, you'd be surprised, across 140,000 students, there's almost always someone who can do it. I had the same problem on our radio station this year. We were left in a deficit. And I have actually found people within our computer science department who are willing to do it for free, for maybe a couple of pints of beer. It is possible, there are options, and it's just a matter of being open-minded, talking to people, listening to ideas, and working things out.
Yeah, I second that. I mean, like both Jen and Freya have said, when you have like a project and you get energy behind it and people are into it, it's amazing the things that you can do and the things that you can create. But like everything, it does need money. And although I take very seriously the kind of caution that Jen has aired about what advertising brings and how that is political and the kind of control that they can begin to exercise on you, and the fact this can be an excuse to get funding cut, I still think that we do need to advertise, we need to get in there early, as the phrase is. And I think if I can get my hands on this website and start to expand it and have all material archived on it, and it becomes a resource for people who want to access articles, blogs, gossip, everything else that they want, then we're going to start to get lots of hits, and the potential for us bringing in advertising and generating revenue on that website is huge. And as we all know, websites are not on decline; they're on the up. So yeah, I would definitely like to second the streamlining point as well.
Thank you. Before we move on to the Bob Holnose Memorial blockbuster question, are there any final points or supplementary questions on what candidates have said up to this point? Yeah.
The idea of legal challenges was touched upon earlier in the context of advertising. In a wider context, and related to the other question about the role of editor, if elected, what experience will you be able to bring to fighting the potential challenges of the freedom of speech that will almost inevitably crop up in time as editor?
Thank you. Okay, I think we're with Ben, not Ben, John first on this one.
Well, as the editor of an occasionally controversial publication, I have actually this year been dealing with historic censorship threats from 2009, 2010. I've been in discussions with legal representatives sort of how to deal with the situation. Not only am I libel trained, and I've sort of been at the coalface very much, and it takes actually a lot of bravery to have somebody telling you to take something down, and to instead say, no, I'm going to take a position of principle on this. The specific instance was somebody who was running for union election a few years ago who made racially insensitive comments and homophobic remarks at the Debating Society, and we reported on this. And in spite of the fact that it was back in 2009, 2010, I honestly believe that we should be doing everything we can to stick up for the right of the journalists to expose this sort of behaviour. And so yeah, not only have I experienced it from a technical trained point of view, but I've also lived it.
Thank you, Fran.
Yeah, okay, so I've already said about my training and things like that. I think John's experience is very valuable and something that I've already enjoyed talking to him about, but I think this is something that you can't ever be afraid in these roles, even if we were editor of the Times, editor of the Guardian, to seek advice. I think there's always a time to talk to other people, to talk to everyone else involved with ULU, and even I know Hesham and Joe before him had links with a lawyer within the University of London who comes in and talks and chats about these things. It is a matter of confidence. Some things you're going to want to stand up for and will be worth it, and some things won't. And it's going to be a matter of decision making and prudence on the editor's behalf. So I think yes, it's got to be some good common sense. And you need to not be afraid to ask.
Yeah, I thankfully haven't had any experience of kind of libel, and I would definitely be giving John a call. and saying, can't mate, they're on to me again. You know, and so I guess I have to say, same as Freya, that I would be reaching out and asking for help. And I do actually have a good friend who's on my campaign team, who's studying law at Birkbeck, so I'd be on the blower to her as well. But it is a matter of what do you want to stick your neck out for, and what is not worth it. You know, and that basically is an editorial decision. It's the classic editorial decision, and it would be about making a wise choice. But I am nothing if not bold.
Yes, a tricky topic, and I'm sure it's something that all student newspapers have faced in sort of some way or other. There's quite often, I know speaking to people often make threats like I'll sue you, and it doesn't materialise. So it's definitely a difficult line to tread. It's all about the decision at the time. I think you have to speak to, if there's a controversial article, you speak to the writer, you speak to that section editor, and then you discuss it and make a decision from there. London Student is also libel checked by a student editor throughout London, for those who don't know, and they're elected at the beginning of the year by the London Student Journalist Support Network. And they, I think in the last 2 years, they've received professional training. So it's a dialogue between them. So I think London Student is in a good position. I think, John, some of your issues with censorship, probably because you're going through a sabbatical officer, who you're probably criticising quite a lot. Whereas I think 2 years ago, it was taken, the libel check was taken away from the sabbatical officer here to being another student journalist. So, but that's an issue there.
Reply in a minute, just do Jen and then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the law is fair. I think the law is about power, actually, and it faces that particular way, and it falls in the way of people with power. And so I think you just have to make a decision about whether things are worth it. So to give an example, the Penguin at LSE got the exclusive Jewish Society take on the Nazi drinking incident on ski trip over Christmas that people probably heard about. Originally, it named the boy who got beaten up, and we got a phone call from his dad who said, "Oh, but we really don't want him named," and explain kind of legally all these different things that were problematic with it. And actually, because it's just an individual, and actually kind of in terms of ethics, he didn't want his name in there. We didn't do it. But I think that actually the bigger troubles you face is when you go after kind of the powers that be. But almost you have to be doubly careful with checking everything in terms of libel, because you're basically going after the big players. But I think that that's the role of journalism, to do, expose management, expose governments, this kind of thing. And I just think it's about consultation. I'm a member of the NUJ. Generally, I'm sure we all know 5 people you could go to check something. And I just think you have to be careful if you really want to do the big stories.
I think that if Ben was as familiar with the case that he was referring to as I am, he would know that the reason that I originally criticised this sabbatical officer was because, in light of a renewed complaint about these offending articles, I was told not just to remove those articles, but the entire cheese-graded website. And that sort of overreaction, that sort of union position towards the press, that, dare I say it, contempt for the work that students do in reporting the news is exactly the sort of thing that I want to stand up against. And if he had been more pragmatic or understanding, then I wouldn't have had a problem.
John, I completely agree with you. And the point I was making, sorry to draw an example, was that by taking it away from a sabbatical officer, a political sabbatical officer, and bringing it actually in-house with a trained journalist as a libel checker, you're making sure that these political situations don't sort of infringe on the story, and that it is sort of more rational decisions that occur through discussion and practice.
Okay. Right, we have our final written question. It is exciting, should we say. Petram is going to read it out. Do please make your answers as brief as possible, although it's a juicy question. Petram.
I'm so excited.
It's going to be anticlimactic now, but what is your take on the crises and criminality of the Murdoch model of journalism? Is campaigning journalism the solution? So your take on the crises and criminality of the Murdoch model of journalism, and is campaigning journalism the solution?
I've been fascinated with the crisis that's been going on. I think it's been a long time coming. I worked last year for an old news agency which worked as a group of freelancers when they started out. And so understanding the plight of freelance journalists and everyone like that against the powers that be and the conflicts that are there is fascinating. I think a paper like the London Student is actually here not only to provide some really good content, but also to train up journalism who want to be in the field. We have a lot of journalists actually who are working freelance for big papers and things like that, but we also have a lot of people. When I first wrote for the London Student, I'd never written before. It's a way of starting things in going into the future and, in fact, building in these new things. I don't think campaigning journalism is the answer. I think the answer is to have an honest and ethical approach and to bring things into the future.
So I know it's really irritating. Can you repeat the question?
Yes,
please?
of course. So the question says, what is your take on the crises and criminality of the Murdoch model of journalism? Is campaigning journalism the solution?
Okay, I get you. Yeah, I'm going to go in guns blazing, news of the world, phone. I've already hacked your phone. Quite much. That's a no. No, of course I wouldn't. I don't hack anyone's phones. But it was some nice stuff, nice by the way, yeah. No, of course, you know. Is campaigning the journalism the answer though? Is it? I don't know. It depends. I guess I'm really selling a kind of a really extreme plan here. You know, it's not either or. I'm really going to try and open this up, crowdsource articles, go to universities, make sure people are getting right and train them to write. So it depends on what people write. If I'm getting thousands of campaigning articles, polemics, I will print them. Obviously, polemics are more of a features thing than a news thing. We don't want polemics from the news section, but it depends on what the London student community writes, and I'm keeping an open mind to what they will give me when I start setting up those channels of communication.
The manifesto states that I want ethical and responsible paper with reporting that is responsible. A campaign paper. There's nothing wrong with running a campaign as long as it does fit with the needs of all of the students. I don't agree that it should be political. I don't agree that it should run campaigns on something really political, controversial. No, there's nothing wrong with running one campaign that is a fairly neutral matter.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking the decision to do a campaign or not is actually a political decision, and it's as political to decide not to as it would be to do it, and decide to do one that is very consensus-like. I would say is a political capitulation. It's a political decision, though. But I know what you mean, basically. You don't want to be divisive or whatever. I would say that campaign journalism, that can break the Murdoch media. I'm not sure if that on its own can break it, but if we're going to have journalism, then I think that actually we can create an alternative media. That's what I would really like to see in this country, where journalists aren't hampered by the fact that they're owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is in league with the government, who is in league with the whole financial system. So actually to break Murdoch and the rest of them, I think we need a movement. But when it comes to journalism, I simply think that it can play a certain part of that. I don't think in and of itself it can achieve this, no.
I think a campaigning answer isn't really a campaigning paper isn't really the answer to any question. But campaigning journalists and campaigning columns and campaigning writers, there are some fantastic writers out there who care incredibly passionately about various things. And in fact, the irony is that the Guardian's investigation into the Murdoch press became almost a campaign for this one journalist. And so campaign paper, a position from an editorial standpoint, that's pushed and over, I don't think is appropriate, but campaign journalists and campaigning investigations and campaign writers, absolutely.
Nice add, because mine's the total opposite to John's. I do want a campaign paper, and I finished on the word no, giving the wrong impression. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, any follow-up from the floor? All down. Okay. Thank you very much, candidates. For the formality, I'll just read out. The first person to speak, quite a long time ago, was John Bell. The second person was Jen Isaacson. The third person was Ben Parfitt. The fourth was Will Mertens. And the fifth was Freya Pascal, standing in person to my right. They're all standing for London Student Editor.
You know what we asked? That's not again about the boycott.